Good morning. We have a great group coming in the room of our CFO members and others. Steering committee members, I see you there. Welcome, everybody. We're actually going to just do video and audio for our speakers only. So I will be turning off your video and audio if it is on, just to kind of keep it streamlined today. It's hard to have everybody's audio on, obviously. So good morning. I'm Jennifer Langley. I manage the Southeast chapters for CFO Leadership Council. I'm sure most of you know already, we produce programs similar to this, usually live. And now we're doing virtual for a little bit here. And we might continue the virtual. It seems to be working really well and people like it. Gina Riley is also on my team. Talk about our run of show for the day, and then I'll turn it over to Tommy Page. Mainly, we're welcome into the room, and thank you for joining us. As I mentioned, Gina's here. We have Tommy Page also on the screen. He's our Charlotte chapter co-chair, along with Charlie Plummer, who's speaking today. And Tommy's with CHR Wine, and I'm sure you can see the big plaque behind him there. Yes, Spirit for CHR Wine. And then Emily Hack is our moderator today. She's going to take it over and just have this great discussion. And we do definitely encourage you to participate via the chat. At the end of the closing comments around 9:10, 9:15, Ben Brandon's going to take over from Vaco. He's got some good things to talk about and, try to shed some positivity on our situation. Again, during the webinar, just please use polling questions, especially if you're doing CPE certification. And we do appreciate your response to the questions. I wrote these questions, so don't blame me if they're not the best in the world, but trying to come up with things relevant to this topic today. So Gina, you want to take it over and launch a polling question for us? Gina, let me know if you're doing that.
Yep, the poll is active, and we have about 75% completion. We'll share the results.
Okay.
Once. The question is, are you expecting to drive a significant change as a result of what's happening with COVID-19?
Okay, great. That'll be interesting to see the results of that question. And we do the polling, again, to kind of track who's on the call on our webinar. So we appreciate your participation. All right, Gina, you want to close that up?
Yep.
Okay. And then I'm going to turn it over to Tommy Page.
Yeah. Thank you, Jennifer. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our first virtual session. We've got a number of things going on with the CFO Leadership Council, a number of upcoming events. The thing I always love so much about the CFO Leadership Council is we focus more on the leadership topic versus the technical stuff. The technical stuff is a dime a dozen, and the leadership is what makes us all better. So that's the thing I love about this. So you can see that we've got a program on May the 1st about award-winning culture, particularly given what we're fighting through now. We have virtual CFO strategy sessions for members. We have sponsorships available. And then you have the CFO Connect. That's the group email forum. And that's been very active lately. So, we offer live events, which now sort of morphed into the virtual event today. We'll have to see how that continues going. There's a lot of networking opportunities. I've made some good friends through the chapter. And there's a lot of webinars there also. Let's see here. And then I want to thank all the sponsors that we have. They're the ones that allow this chapter to do what we do. That includes Adaptive Insights, Bank of America, BDO, Insperity is a new one with Matt and Emily. McGuire Woods, they've been with us since day one, and they've been hosting all our live events, and we certainly appreciate that. So we can't be together today. We got Sage Intact, USI, and then Vaco. Vaco's new, and Ben's on the call with us today too. So with that,
I think that Jamie and Matt and Ben want to say just a few words of welcome.
Okay.
Jamie, you.
Oh, sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm an account executive with Adaptive Insights, and we're a proud member of the CFO Council. We partner with a number of CFOs. We provide a financial planning solution that's cloud-based, and as we know, 2020 is shaping up to be a year, filled with change and uncertainty, and market forces have shortened a number of planning cycles at companies down to now an instant, and making long-range planning even more difficult. So we've always found that finance, it kind of lands on their desk as far as the business looking to them to run financial models and saying, how is this change going to impact our workforce? How is it impacting our supply chain, our operations? And a lot of times finance is tasked with trying to compile a lot of data from a lot of different sources using Excel to try to make sense of it and present it in an understandable format. So Adaptive Insights partners there to try to make that process easier and really bring an active planning process. And the goal there is just to make informed decisions faster. So looking forward to today's presentation. Thank you.
Matt?
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. Good morning, everybody. My name is Matt Butler. I'm with Insperity. I've been with Insperity for about 9 years now. First and foremost, I hope that everybody is healthy and safe. I did have a call yesterday with somebody that has actually contracted the virus, and him and his wife are recovering. He went into detail about how serious it was when you actually get sick. So got a little bit of insight there. I do know that everybody's managing through this differently, and it's affecting everybody differently in their own unique ways. But I've said several times to several people that I couldn't be more happy to be working at Insperity right now. From the top down, we've really been in the trenches, shoulder to shoulder, fighting with our clients, trying to help them navigate this crisis and make very difficult decisions that impacts not just the business, but all of their employees too. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what the panel has to say and learning from some of the folks here. I don't think that anybody knew when we put this on the calendar that this would be as relevant information and a relevant topic as we did 6 months ago when it got on the book. So hopeful we all get something valuable out of it this morning, and looking forward to the information. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Ben, you want to say a few words? And then we'll turn
to Tommy. Sure. Thanks, Jennifer. My name's Ben Brandon with Vaco. I'm the managing director. We are somewhat new to CFO Leadership Council, but very excited to be a part of it and feel like it's definitely a platform where we can add a lot of value to a lot of our clients who are CFOs, controllers. Vaco, we're a talent and solutions search firm. So we're in the trenches with our clients right now, trying to figure out work from home strategies. And I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end when we address some of the COVID stuff. But excited to be with everybody today, and very excited about the panel. And I appreciate it, Jennifer.
Sure. Tommy?
Okay, very good. Our moderator today is Emily Hack with Insperity. You can see her bio there. She's recently moved to Charlotte with Insperity and has a lot of good experience. And she's had some nice awards she's been given too. So she's a real mover and shaker. I got to meet her at the last social we had, which was certainly interesting. Had a nice long conversation with her. So with that, I'll turn it over to Emily to moderate the panel.
Yes, hi everybody. Thanks for having me this morning. I'm really impressed by the CFO Leadership Council in general. We enjoyed the beginnings of understanding it as we're launching CFO Leadership Council in the national market, and then to get involved quickly here. It's a great group and lots of talented folks to be able to lean on, particularly in situations like this. Like Matt said, we had no idea on that, snow day that we decided to postpone that it was meant to be, really, to give us this extra time and reschedule for today in a week that, talking about, turnarounds and, innovation needs and times of trial, man, we are smack dab in the middle of it. So we have Terry Quilio. Did I get it, Terry?
You did.
And Charlie Plummer and Sally Rollinson here today. And I've really enjoyed, we had kind of planned prior to COVID hitting, going through turnovers that they essentially had chosen and are experts in doing that and done it multiple times. So whether we're not in a position necessarily to be choosing to take on a tough situation right now, but these are folks that definitely have done it time and time again. So it'll be interesting to hear more about their stories and also how they're applying that in this kind of unknown territory that we're experiencing right now. So if we can, I'd love for each of them to kind of tell an overview of themselves and their experience. So Terry, do you want to start?
Sure. Thanks, Emily, and good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. I've actually been a member, I was a founding member of the CFO Leadership Council. I've been involved from the beginning, and it's great to see how much it's grown and how much, and this virtual seminar is actually getting even more involvement. So wonderful to see. I've been the Chief Financial Officer for BioDelivery Sciences since January of last year. It's a small, publicly traded, but rapidly growing biopharmaceutical company. Interesting, though, in that it was really a total transformation and a lot of lessons learned in the last year, and now we have some more challenges ahead of us. Before that, I was CFO for another publicly traded company, Balchem Corporation. I was CFO and COO at Diversey, which was a division of Sealed Air, and another big transformation, first in turning the business more profitable, but ultimately for preparing it to ultimately be sold to Bain Capital. So that was a huge project and undertaking, and took well over a year just to lead that piece of it. Prior to that, I worked at Novartis Pharmaceuticals. I had many, many years, over 20 years at Mars, incorporated in pretty much every kind of finance role that you could have, and also had the opportunity to start up their confectionery business in Brazil as president and general manager from scratch. So I'm attracted to and love building things and transforming things, and happy to be here today.
Thank you, Terry. Charlie?
Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. It's an honor to be a part of this panel. We had a lot of fun preparing for this, and now, as we said, the topic couldn't be, or the subject couldn't be more topical on business continuity and transformation as we're in this uncertain times. I'm presently the CFO of Cayman Cargo Controls, a leading gas and oil industry service provider based in Houston. I joined Cayman last summer after a 2-year turn at Charlotte-based Auto Environmental Systems. While Cayman represents my 5th middle market CFO role, Auto was my first true CFO role where it was pitched to me as an opportunity for a turnaround or a transformational situation. But really, all of my CFO roles have had some sort of transformational element to it, which we'll talk about today. Before joining Auto, I joined a Silicon Valley startup called Proterra that developed 100% electric transit buses, and that was invested in by Kleiner Perkins, one of the granddaddies of the venture startup capital in Silicon Valley, and it was a great role. And I was hired by a newly appointed CFO who was leading a reboot of the startup at that time, so that was very transformational. I also started my career at Ford Motor Company. I spent 11 years there in a lot of different roles throughout Ford, and then 5 years at Fisher Scientific, which later became Thermo Scientific while I was there, and that was exciting to be a part of that integration and acquisition. a lot of the, as you're going to hear today, I think a lot of the factors that drive the success of a business and the role of the CFO is, you're going to hear about, you know, the CEO is the partner, the ownership aspect, the lender, the business model. If you boil it down, I really believe that the success of the CFO and frankly the business, it boils down to the talent on the finance team. And in the roles where I succeeded and the business did well, I was fortunate enough to drive and develop a high-performing finance team. And in the situations where less successful and I was less successful, it was a result of my lack of really prioritizing getting the right talent on board very early and really unleashing them to drive the success of the business. And so I want to talk about that more as we get into this. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. Miss Sally Rollinson.
Thank you, Emily. Hi, everybody. This is actually my first time joining the CFO Leadership Forum, and yes, so my first time as a panelist as well. So thank you for having me here today. So as you can hear from the accent, I'm not American, so actually South African by birth, and lived in the US for the last 3 years. I'm currently the Chief Financial Officer for the NTT Americas Group. I oversee the 5 countries under the Americas, which is the US, Canada, Brazil, Chile, and Mexico. My career started in South Africa, where I actually trained with Deloitte. I spent a small secondment time here in the US during that 3-year period, and absolutely fell in love with the US, and decided that this is ultimately where I would make my way back to. So the opportunity actually arose 3 years for my family and I to relocate to Charlotte, and when I took up the Chief Financial Officer position. So spent the last 12 years with the broader NTT Group. NTT is an IT technology solutions business, and with a global footprint. So before that, having spent some time also in London, spent 3 years working and living in London, which was an amazing experience and a life experience as well as a career experience. So good to be here. I think this topic is, yeah, as we all have said, couldn't have come at a better time. I think we're all facing, you know, through the course of our careers, we all face some kind of crises in the companies that we work for. Some of them come along gradually as a result of mismanagement or other market conditions, and some of them come just out of nowhere. And I think this one that's got us at the moment is just a very disruptive one that's caught us unawares. So it'll be interesting just to hear the other panelists' views around some of the things we're doing to try and keep the wheels in motion at the moment, but also to hear the stories on their journeys as to those, I guess, slow developing crises that we face. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Glad you're here. I hope we can entice you to visit more often, Sally. So a question just came in from Deshaun Matthews, and it quite honestly was the first one I was going to ask. I'm curious to hear from the panel. Just give us a picture of what you guys have been experiencing in the last 2 weeks. I know originally we were going to talk about past turnover projects, but tell us what's been happening lately. I know different companies have been impacted at different varying levels, and would love to hear some of the priorities you are taking on as far as impacting change or preparing to protect your company from a financial perspective.
Do you want me to? I'll go first. So yeah, it's hard to believe that it's just been about 2 weeks. We were actually doing our earnings call on Thursday 2 weeks ago, and we were, you know, starting to get a sense of what this, you know, that this was going to be something pretty monumental, but really it's only been 2 weeks since then, and a lot has happened. You know, I think the hardest part for all of us, and the thing that we struggle most with our leadership team and our board, is just the uncertainty. Nobody knows how long this will go, and and what we really need to be planning for. So I think that's number one is we've spent a lot of time running scenarios, every possible, you don't even know what scenarios to run, but what happens if your business is down 25%, 50%, and really going through and planning for maybe not the very worst possible situation, but a pretty bleak situation, and starting to take actions so that we are protecting ourselves financially. I mentioned before that the company, when I joined, has been a true transformation, and it has been in every way. We're growing significantly, organizationally we're different, but also financially. We were less than 2 years ago on the brink of insolvency, totally changed our financial situation through last year, and we want to protect that. So we've spent a lot of time to come up with a list of actions to take. We were in a fast growth mode. We grew 100% last year. We were planning to grow over 50% in 2020. We realized that, our first priority is to at least retain the business. We may not be able to grow as much as we did, but we had investments planned to support that growth. So we've taken a really hard look at which investments we need to reconsider or delay, and hold off things that maybe, aren't going to have an impact for the next few months. Probably more than anything, though, we are primarily a selling organization. Out of close to 200 employees, I'd say over 140, almost 150 are sales focused, either on reps on the street or their managers and so on. And the first thing we did was, actually that weekend, 2 weekends ago, we said, they're working remote. How do reps work on remote when they have to go into the offices? So we've put in place a number of extra training for them to keep them active. But at the same time, our marketing team has just jumped into full gear to look at different types of materials that the reps can use to try to talk to the doctor's offices virtually, since they can't call on them. We can't just have them sitting at home doing nothing. But at the same time, so that's been our primary focus, I have to say, has been our employee base, because they are our arms and legs, and that's what keeps the business going. So a lot of focus on that. We really do, we would not want to lay off people. We don't intend to at this time. There's a big cost to that, right? Even if you laid off somebody today, you're going to pay, by the time you pay any severance, you pay COBRA, you pay some outplacement, you're talking about, almost 3 months of equivalent pay that you'd be incurring. Then if the business is up and running in, 2 quarters or something, you're going to have to pay a recruiter again to backfill the position. You're going to have to retrain people. So our view is that it's better to really try and retain our sales force, and most importantly, keep them engaged and keep them reaching out to the doctor's offices. So with that, though, we had to look at other things that go along with employees. So do we delay our merit increases that were scheduled to go in place next week? Do we reps, for the overall company, the bonus accrual is just an accrual. It's not actual cash. So we can make a decision there. But for reps, we actually pay quarterly. So we had to make a decision even for Q1. Are we going to go ahead and pay them? Maybe nothing above and beyond, but at least at what their base target would have been, so that, you keep them retained. Do we look at and I know this is one with Charlie we were talking about the other day, do we pull back on our 401k matching? One thing that we've so all of those, those 3 that I just mentioned, we're actually able to wait a few weeks or a month and other than the merit increase, we decided we're going to go ahead with that. But the others we're holding off a few weeks. The thing that we did implement right away, and we are growing, and we did have a number of probably 15 or 20 open positions. We've frozen all new hires, right? We don't want to be hiring new people if we're thinking of the potential risk down the road later this year of having to let people go. So we have frozen all new hires entirely, and then are holding our options open around some of the other things. I think that, and then like I said before, just really, really taking a hard look at all of our investments, our spend, and everything and anything that's not essential to keep the business going for the next few months, and to make sure that we can reaccelerate as soon as things pick back up. We want to still have everything in place to keep going. So that's where our focus has been.
And one other thing to add to that, Terry, from an HR perspective, I'm not sure if everybody on the phone realizes Insperity is an HR firm that supports small to mid-sized companies. So we've been strategizing a lot with all of our clients this week on certainly from a finance perspective, all the strategies that you guys are looking at of, halting pay increases, can we, stop a 401k match, or things that they're not going to notice. But if you are, especially in the smaller companies that are in hospitality or retail, it's hitting a lot faster and a lot harder. And there's creative solutions where we're, suggesting TLOs, which are temporary layoffs, that, you can have someone technically laid off for a 3-month period without converting them to a permanent layoff, while they are then still not converted to COBRA, but still on the health insurance. And the company does continue to contribute to health insurance. But through this, at least being able to have those employees keep on their primary health coverage is a nice bonus. And hopefully then you're not back to recruiting and trying to get new people back if this lightens up. Other things is, if the stimulus bill does pass, there's some advantages to keeping people on payroll. So we're kind of, I know there's a voice vote today from the House, and we're kind of all, on the edge of our seats waiting for that to see how we can very quickly understand all that is that bill, and wait for the Treasury to give us direction on how to access that, and advise our clients on next steps for that as well. Charlie, did you want to go next and tell us about what you experienced and changes that you're enacting in your company?
Very similar to what Terry described. Cayman Cargo Controls is fortunate as a oil and gas services provider. We're actually considered essential services. So our business has really continued surprisingly normal. We're actually surprised at the demand, which we call nominations, from the oil refiners and the traders. Every time oil or gas changes hands, our business needs to inspect it and then take samples and actually test it to verify that it's the octane level or type of crude that the seller is saying it is for the buyer. The biggest thing for us is exactly what we just described, which is scenario planning. And we've done a lot of work on saying, if revenue drops by 10%, 20%, 30%, what does that mean? What are our levers within the business that we can quickly enact? Luckily, so far, the only thing we've really done is cut back on overtime and freeze hiring, to Terry's point. We're still discussing the decision whether to postpone matching on the 401k, for example, and we're watching with bated breath as we see the nominations come in on a daily basis. But really, it's focused around cash planning, which my team does a fantastic job on already, and then really the scenarios on that and what we need to do to ensure liquidity throughout the downturn, and obviously the uncertainty around how long this downturn could last.
And we have another polling question, so if you guys could take a second to respond to that, especially those who are getting CPE credits. We are making sure everyone's on the line and engaged, and curious to hear what HR changes you've made as well. Sally, are there, I know we hit a lot of them. I think the other day when we talked, you were talking about freezing hires immediately too. Are there other things that you want to add to this particular topic of what's going on with you?
Yes,
right?
I think maybe just to add a little bit on to what Charlie and what Terry said. I think we, it is around the scenario analysis, and it is around looking at sort of like businesses and other markets that have already been hit by the coronavirus and dealing with the pandemic. I know in our industry, we're kind of taking a lead from what's happened in China to say, I know that businesses in that sector have dropped orders by 30%. So, it's running those scenarios and then saying, okay, on a list of priorities, what are the first things we do? So I think we've all done similar things. So frozen investments in headcount, all talking about the 401k, merit increases. And I think there's a list of priorities of, say, as you go down the line, it's the top ones, the easy ones, discretionary spend, marketing. As you go down the list, it becomes to, the worst case scenarios where you're starting to potentially going to a furlough or actually laying people off. So I think it is about running those scenarios. But I think also just in a time like this, finance acts as a bit of an anchor, because when it comes to a crisis mode, I think this is an opportunity for finance to be that anchor that everybody's looking for. And I think the facts and the scenarios that you run and the plans that we put in place give people a sense of control in an environment where everything is just so disruptive and changing around you. And also to not forget about the people element in all of this. Whether it's your own teams or whether it's the broader executive team that you operate in, I think it's really important to say we have to over-communicate in times like this as opposed to under-communicating. And I've found that there's a lot of people within the executive team as well as within the broader organization looking to finance to give them that anchor stability through this time. And I think it's important that we remember through all of this, we all people going through a lot of a heightened level of anxiety in a world that we don't know and understand at the moment. And over communicate with both your teams. We're working in a virtual environment. I'm fortunate in that I work for a global business, so virtual's kind of part of the course. But a lot of my team, they go into the office every single day, and it's maintaining that interaction and communication with everybody to say I'm here, even if it's just a quick 10 minutes. If we don't need it, we can just say hello, and then we get on with our lives, to maintain that level of communication and motivation and productivity, because we all have businesses to run now. The world, we've got to keep going. And I think we all want to keep going. We want that value and purpose. So, it's important to keep everybody motivated and to be that anchor.
Yeah. And Sally, that's a great lead in. Charlie and Terry, is there more that you'd like to share with as far as packaging the message? I know the other day we talked about, if we do something like cutting the match on 401k, what kind of message or reaction are we expecting from the employees? And certainly people are expecting change and kind of a little bit less gut jerk reaction, because they kind of understand what's going on throughout the world and we're all in a helper mentality. But is there any way from a leadership perspective that you are particularly carving that communication style of any potential upcoming changes?
So what we've been doing is right from the beginning, I mentioned before, we're mostly a selling organization. We have people all over the country. And so we're doing weekly town halls with the entire employee population. In addition, like my team, I'm having, I'm in touch with most of my direct reports multiple times a day, but getting the full team together at least once a week and doing like Zoom meetings so you can see each other. But what we messaged initially was 2 weeks. I think we know that many of our employees are worried about layoffs. They're hearing about their colleagues and peers in other companies. And what we've added beyond the town halls is actually our leadership team. We've divvied up, let's say, the sales force of, like I said, about 130 people. And we each took, I don't know, I have like 20 names, and we're just giving them a call, chatting, reminding them that we're here, that we're thinking about them, that we're supporting, how can we help, asking them for feedback, and really trying to keep them engaged and knowing that we're thinking about them and that we're, concerned. We have had a lot, we haven't figured out we haven't made a decision on any of those options that I talked about earlier, other than the merit increase. And that one we looked at, frankly, the dollar impact was the lowest. And we said, you know what, we're going to keep the merit increase going into a place basically Monday, because otherwise it could be sending a message of that we were really concerned, right? And then that would just, before we even know very much, get them concerned. And that's one reason that we decided to go ahead with that. But I think the toughest piece will be if and when we have to think about things like you mentioned, a temporary layoff or paring back, or, by the way, we've been managing some people on performance plans anyways. If you start to act on them, people could get, because you should and you would have anyway, it starts to send out a red flag. So as a leadership team, we don't have all the answers yet, but we are spending a lot of time talking about that and the best way to manage it and how to package it when we get to that point.
Cayman Cargo was fortunate in the timing from the team because the merit increases went into effect right before day one of what are we in, day 12 right now? So it was right before that. And we also got our 2019 bonuses paid, which was a big cash hit, a one-time hit, obviously. But again, looking back, it was like, uh-oh, should we have done that? But we really didn't know what we didn't know at the time, which was good, just to lunch off of what Terry was saying. But just to emphasize the communication theme, the executive team meets once a day for Cayman, and again, going through what's the latest on the personnel situation. Has anyone contracted? Has anyone quarantined? And going through all that. Also, again, discussing the demand. Where are we? We discuss cash, and then continuing to refine the scenario planning so that we're ready to act when we need to. For myself, I make a point to reach out to my team, not just the direct reports. Two of them are actually on the line here today, or actually three of them. Andy's calling in from Belgium, Andy Van Dam. So, but it's interesting. As I've been teasingly saying, I'd rather be lucky than good. We drove launching Zoom in the corporation right before this hit. It was literally done just in time. In fact, we were still working out the bugs of it as people started working from home. So that's been really fortunate because this type of connectivity that we have, the CEO has said that it feels like we're all in the same room together. So. But really just overemphasizing over communication to Terry's point. Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. We have Teams in our computer systems and people weren't really using it, but they're all getting acquainted with it now. I actually wanted to add one thing on communication beyond, and I totally agree on the over communication. It's the external communication. We're a publicly traded company. I don't know how many of the folks on, in participating today are dealing with that, but that's an area where I and myself and the CEO are spending a lot of time, right? We have investors calling us, wanting to understand what we're planning, where we see the impact. We're coming up, actually today, starting yesterday, we're in quiet period until our earnings release, which will be in early May. So, there's a lot of speculation from investors. Our stock price certainly took a hit. Even though a lot of people believe our business should be able to sustain through it. So it's not easily explained. People are wondering if we have supply chain issues, or would we have supply chain issues? How's our sales force going to work? So managing the external stakeholders is a large part of my job and the CEO's job through this transition. Yesterday we do have a loan, and I was on the phone with our lender, and they indicated they have a lot of confidence in us, but you got to keep them, you got to show them that you're confident and that you're thinking of everything and taking action. So there's that piece of communication that also is so critical right now.
And Terry, you actually have a lot of good stories about the investor relations and banking relationships and how to really dig into that. And I'd love to come back around to that. Just wanted to address Jennifer's question. Unless, Sally, did you want to add one more thing before we kind of pivot?
Yeah, I think just adding on to all of those things is also just about business continuity plans. I don't know if anybody else is facing the same challenges as I am, but it really has to be quite an agile environment. So, when things started happening 2 weeks ago, we've got warehouses on the East Coast in New York, on Long Island, and I've got in the West Coast in California. And, procurement is my baby, so to speak, and supply chain. And it was acting really quickly to say, reactive, go to clients, inventory that we've got in the warehouse. Do you want it now? Can we ship it now? As the shelter orders were coming in California, we literally got one load of inventory out the warehouse because we actually didn't know whether we would be deemed an essential service. It turned out we were deemed an essential service, so we were lucky in that respect. But I think in a time like this, it's almost having that really agile crisis management, because you can't afford to sit and ponder for days how to address the situation. It's not like one of those gradual crises that we've been in before. It's like you got to be agile on the spot, making decisions and making them quickly. because things are, changing, and the impact of it just can be so much proportionately higher. So I think in these times, even just from a leadership perspective, what happens if one of us gets sick? So it's who steps in and takes, if that business continuity part of it. If I get sick, who steps in and takes over the CFO function? For me, I think we've got to be thinking about those things as well.
And speaking of those businesses that are truly even more essential, like the opposite of the retail and hospitality struggle, you have the companies like Zoom, who are busy bees, and wireless providers. So pivoting to Jennifer Struken's question here, she said, as a distributor of wireless network equipment, our sales have actually increased a good amount this month. But it's an interesting question of what steps are you taking to mitigate risk from credit and collections? So it's great that everyone wants to buy, but how do you kind of prepare for the potential that the budgets of your customers may be struggling? Any thoughts on that to share with Jennifer?
I think quite an interesting piece of information that I got from my team this week was just the Dun & Bradstreet listing of all the higher risk clients as a result of what we're going through, so what they have identified as being higher risk, and potential steps that need to be taken in terms of credit given to these specific clients. That's one thing that we have done, is just to reevaluate almost the credit limits and what we have outstanding with our clients, as one step of trying to mitigate that that collections issue that we may have on the back end. It's hard in these scenarios. I've actually got an example of one of our hospital clients. Pre this, we were actually having issues with collections from this hospital group. And because we're essential IT services, we actually manage the infrastructure for this hospital, the network infrastructure. And my team actually put them on hold last week, unbeknownst to me, because we've been struggling with collections and they weren't actually paying. But it so happened that we actually have essential equipment that has to go to the hospital. I mean, they're on the West Coast in Santa Clara. And their network is just really struggling with all the volume. So this is some of the dilemma, almost like a moral dilemma, that I've now faced this week, as we have a collections problem with them. They desperately need this equipment. And my decision was to lift it. It was to lift the credit hold and to let the equipment go out, because I think morally, from my perspective, it's hard to justify, not doing that in a time of crisis that we're in today. So some interesting moral dilemmas that are happening at the moment.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add, I mean, obviously we are looking, especially we sell mostly through wholesalers. There's the three big in the industry that, we're pretty confident are going to make it through this. And I think it's the smaller ones that we're keeping a careful eye and making sure we're monitoring the sales as we let them go. I'm rerunning the DMB reports, but frankly, they're not going to help me very much, because they're not for today or tomorrow. So it's really trying to make a judgment call, and where I can, I'm asking for financial statements, but we're just keeping a careful eye on it.
I agree. I think the bigger customers for Cayman Cargo, we're not that worried about the major oil companies that you're all familiar with. It's some of the smaller traders and some of the smaller companies that we've seen slow down in payments in our AR collections, which obviously makes us nervous. But it's again, back to the question, I would just say it's micromanagement and drive accountability. If it's new customers, who's the business development or salesperson that's got the relationship with them to understand their business model and their viability on the other side of this crisis.
Yeah, and really, I mean, living in the smaller business world personally, we're just pulling out all the stops for a lot of our clients, and really, Insperity is a $4 billion publicly traded company. We have withstood dips below when hits to the economy happen in 2008 and 2009. I believe we temporarily, thankfully, lost about 20% of our book of business, and then it V-curved back up. So really, we're strategizing with our clients to figure out how we can offer temporary offsets and temporary credits, not to truncate any of the deals that they have, or just give absolute freebies, but trying to strategize and figure out truly how do we keep you in business through this, because we truly believe America is going to get through this, and we believe it's going to be short term. So how much can we help? And to Sally's point, it's a bit of a moral dilemma. In one ways you don't want to hurt your own company, but from our perspective, how much are we thriving if our clients don't exist anymore? So doing our best to help them through that, and even little shifts, every little bit is helping right now. So I'd love to, in previous conversations, we were focusing on, the two pivotal perspectives in navigating change, being, the finance perspective, and then also the leadership perspective. And I think we've hit that in the basics of our reactions immediately on COVID and things like that. But, any general transition, would you guys like to share with us, how you evaluate the current debt and cash flow, and then a little bit more in depth on how you manage the relationships with investors or banks or key stakeholders? I know, Terry, you had a really interesting example of, being a salesperson and knowing the analytics and adjusting interest rates and challenging those. Do you want to share that story with the group?
Sure. Thanks, Emily. So yeah, I mentioned before when I joined BDSI, my current company, it probably had been about 8 months since they were truly on the brink of insolvency. They had been able to do a secondary offering and raise some money the summer before I joined. So they had some cash, but they were still burning at a pretty good rate every quarter. So I came in and we were carrying a loan, which effectively had an interest rate of over 21.5% annually. So huge interest payments that were due. And I came in and the business was starting to turn around, but you really, and we were looking to acquire a product. So I jumped in immediately. We were actually in the negotiations with the seller of this product. And one of the things, I had to do immediately was learn the business and build out models. We didn't have really a good FP&A function. We didn't have any FP&A function. There weren't really good, there were models, but I really took a hard look at it, looked at what I thought our cash projections could be if we continued on the growth trajectory that we saw. And I started to reach out to banks and lenders, big banks, small banks, these small kind of riskier lenders who charge you higher rates, and understand kind of how they saw us, but also to start to sell the story of who we were and the trajectory we were on, the new leadership that we had leaders who had been in major corporations, who had led transformations, showing that we were getting the results and delivering on what we said. So, showing and really showing truly our that we could be credible, and it is a selling job in a way. You have to convince them that you know how to manage the money and that you'll manage it effectively. And spent a lot of time, like I said, I learned I couldn't at that point still get big bank kind of loans. We weren't at that point, we weren't cash flow positive yet. I was projecting that by the end of the year we would be, and in fact we were very cash flow positive by the fourth quarter. But it was just a projection, and them having to trust me. So I still had to work with smaller lenders, but was able to obtain, for example, a loan that was much more favorable. I'm paying less than half the interest rate. I'm still paying about a little over 9%, so not not great, but still a lot better than 21.5%. And I have 3 years of interest only. So, I really improved, I think, our balance sheet from that perspective, and also took advantage of the momentum to do an equity raise at that time, or actually right before the refinancing. So again, I did the loan afterwards, but I felt the market and our stock was doing well, and we were able to do a confidential wall cross raise where we got what the banks told us, one of the best discount and fees in the past 2 years. We basically paid a 1%, or we got a 1% discount, 4% fees. Typically, you're in the mid single digits, 6 to 8% if you're lucky, or more. So, overall was able to put a lot of cash on the balance sheet, strengthen our position with the lenders. And as part of that, and talking a little bit about what I mentioned before in terms of openness and transparency, I think spent a lot of time with investors throughout that period. Any way we do that, but really through that period, because to do an effective equity raise, you need investors willing to buy into the business. And we were able to do that. But I think also being open, for example, with our lender, I speak to them often. I'm very open and transparent about where we are as a business, how we're doing. I mentioned earlier that I was speaking with them yesterday, and using the opportunity to learn what the insights they're hearing from the market, but actually, giving them some, I think, confidence of what we're doing. And in fact, it felt pretty good at the end of the call. He actually said to me, we do feel good with you knowing you're steering the wheel there. You're not one of the companies that we're worrying about in our portfolio. So obviously there's no guarantees of where the markets can go in the next 3 to 9 months, let's say. But I think communication and I think really knowing your business, really, I dug in right away, did the models, learned the business. I had to do that personally. I actually did a lot of it myself because I needed to be really confident before I could go and speak to others confidently about where the business was and where it was going.
And we talked about, compliments to you, Terry, and really the entire panel on building your own kind of credibility as a CFO and your past experience so that you can, you are known of having your ducks in the row and knowing all the analytics and having the trust of the bankers. It makes a big difference in how comfortable they feel of what they can and can't, approve in goodwill for their bank. Charlie, we talked quite a bit about really balancing the culture between the pressure to produce and needing the right numbers through change and tumultuous experiences versus encouraging your staff to innovate and still having the freedom to say, bring me new ideas. I think at Auto in particular, you realized it was the talent that you needed to improve and really went to investors to pitch why you needed that talent, even if, you weren't cash flow positive and things like that. So can you tell us a little bit about how that story and how you became kind of a salesperson for new talent?
Yeah, absolutely. I firmly believe that the success of the CFO role, I know it's cliche to say, but you're only as good as your team. It's so true. And at Auto, the business had deteriorated where if you had marketable skills, you had already left Auto, and it was unfortunate. And so when I came in, the first thing I noticed was that the morale was bad on the finance and accounting team, but frankly, the talent wasn't there either. And so Kyle Nilsson, who's a member of the Charlotte chapter and just received the award this year for up-and-coming leadership in finance from the Charlotte chapter, he's on the call. He was my first hire, and he was a breath of fresh air, questioned everything, and really helped, as Terry said, get into the value drivers of the business when we realized that there's a lot of parts of the business that weren't contributing to the financial success. And he did all the hard work, and I took all the credit, but we then proposed to the investors and to the CEO that we should really shed parts of the business that weren't contributing. And to your point, there was several sales points or persuasion points in there. One was to actually convince the investors and the lenders and the CEO that we needed to invest in the finance team and to put that value in there and really spend the money to do it. And Kyle made me proud. I just talked to the new CEO there now yesterday, and he was still complimenting me, which it was all the team on hiring Kyle and the other finance talent there, Krista Rendino and David Kennedy, that are still there and still helping him. So it made me comfortable also to leave and move on because of having it. But Kyle is one of my best hires ever. In the situation I'm in now with Cayman Cargo, I walked into a situation where I haven't turned over one finance role. Jeff Vaughn, who's the corporate controller, Marion Chitricalo, who is the vice president of finance for the U.S. and Canada, and then we have a CFO for international operations, David Garibaldi. I walked into really good finance talent there, and so it's been a very different role there. It's more coaching and mentoring and slight tweaks to really good reporting and analysis that they are all doing. But the auto situation was really just start with a clean sheet of paper from the finance team and from the way the business was communicating, approaching, and analyzing and reporting and driving accountability. I came into Cayman, and it's really minor tweaks that are trying to make a difference with that team. So.
Well, Sally, just on only a few calls with you, you have such a positive energy about you. And we had a couple of conversations culturally about the importance when motivation is low or fear is high, you know, how to really bring your own energy and instruction and encouragement to the table. Do you have any examples to share how you've done that or what's going on now in that area?
So I think one of the things when I came into my particular situation that I found was that there wasn't a lot of accountability, and within broadly across the organization, but also specifically within finance. So you know, my mandate is to look after the quote to cash process. So as part of that, it was establishing some really simple KPIs, simple metrics that everybody felt they were being held accountable to. And I think what was important for me was to establish metrics that were just within reach. You know, just stretch a little bit, but something that I knew that they could get to and that we needed as a business to get to. And I think that was important because you start to be able to celebrate the wins then. And every time you push them a little bit further and a little bit further. And celebrating those wins with itself brings that momentum and energy, because often when we're coming into these situations where you've got a business that's in crisis, the motivation levels are really low. And to Charlie's point, often you've got to look at your own team around you and say, okay, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. I've got to surround myself with people, you know, that I think can actually get there. And I think that was important. It was an interesting way to figure out who then had the motivation and the skill set and the willingness to be held accountable and to drive the change that we needed, you know, to get where we were going to go. So really important to have that team around you, but also just to celebrate those wins is just so important.
Yeah. Raja put in a question here on the chat where, you know, he's acknowledging it may be a bit early in the pandemic to really assess this, but was curious to hear from you guys any skill gaps on your teams when you're setting yourself up to prepare for this crisis. Have you changed your development plans or for your finance members?
So I'll jump in. I would say it is early. I would say, first of all, I think for all of us, every one of us, we've never experienced something so sudden and dramatic as this, right? So I guess when you have as many years of experience as I do, and a lot of us do, you can draw upon different experiences, and certainly, you know, all of us on the panel have been involved in different kinds of transformations, so you can pull from that. But I would say so many people are really not necessarily prepared for this. I think what I've been fortunate, just as part of what I've been doing the last year, and especially in the last 6 months, I've been able to attract some really good talent, some good people who also don't necessarily have the skills to, totally run through this. But for example, I have an FP&A director who's been a real help to me the last couple of weeks as I've been running these scenarios and over. And, he's helped build these models so we can look at different options much more quickly. And so those kinds of things are really helpful. I would say I haven't really changed any development plans. It's only been a couple of weeks. I think what I'm trying to do is really help people prioritize and focus on what they need to do day to day. I'm spending time with my controller, looking at our AP and looking at our customer, our sales, like a lot more digging into things like that. But fortunately, I am fortunate that I've been able to attract some good people in the last 6 months that are, I think, able to pull upon their prior experiences to step up to the challenge, really dig in, look at what they haven't looked at, and really work together as well.
The other potential, and we're early, we don't know what's going to happen, but Charlie, you had experience in the past of really kind of reevaluating auto at the beginning and a core market pivot. So can you talk to us a little bit about how you involved the board and really, started bringing up some difficult ideas that might have been difficult for the existing team to swallow, and how to move forward with that?
Absolutely. If you think about it, there's always, you can't turn everyone over. So there's always going to be the people that were around before, and you have to be sensitive to their feelings, I guess, for lack of a better word, because some of them were there when the business declined and went into that. So as soon as you want to touch anything that was generating revenue, people, especially the ownership and then the team members, are very reluctant to ever give up on revenue. And I'm the same way. If there's any chance of keeping that revenue, because it's so hard to get new revenue, that's why we pay salespeople so much. So the hardest thing in the world is to walk away from that. So that persuasion really takes a lot of good analysis. And again, it ends up showing what the product margins are, what the competitive margins are, what the history of negotiations with your customers are, and really those are the kind of the persuasive factors to be able to then say, hey, we need to get rid of this division or this product line because the margins just aren't there, and here's why we can't fix the margins, because it's a commodity. In the auto case, it was a lot of commodities that they were one of the first ones to really bring the products to the U.S. from Europe. And because of that, they got very much used to having very good margins because they could price. And that really went away as competition grew in the U.S. So really just showing that competitive landscape, getting to the value drivers of the business and understanding how the customers are viewing it, how their pricing decisions are happening, and really using all that to really persuade not just the external or the ownership, but the internal constituents who this is their babies, this is their products, they're the ones that brought it to market, it was their idea to diversify, those types of things. So it was really a selling point inside and outside.
Well, right now, we're getting kind of close to the end. I want to give an opportunity for any other questions, but before we move to that, I just want to throw one thing out. Sally did reference kind of an ethical issue when it comes to making decisions with regard to sending equipment to a hospital. Are there other, I feel like through COVID, we are really just all in it together, and it helps to know that other people are struggling as well, or seeing how people are reacting. Are there other examples that you've seen come up already where you're having to make tough decisions, not necessarily on, from a cash flow basis or the way you may in the past, but just more sensitive, almost ethical issues coming up around COVID?
I think the other, maybe Emily, just the other thing was, I think just referencing what Terry said earlier, is that you actually have underperforming individuals in your teams at times. I mean, that's just part of business as usual. And at a time like this where you're planning to maybe exit individuals, and you actually just as a human, step back and say, okay, this is actually not the right time to do this, even though from a business perspective, it is the right thing to do. you almost pause on those things that you instinctively, reactively as a business need to do and say, okay, as a human being, this is just really not the right time. We'll reevaluate in another 2 weeks or months or whatever. Just hold off for now. So I think mine have come from both the perspective of clients, but also the employee base to say, oof, okay, I don't think it's the right time to do that now. But even though as a business, we should be doing it.
No, that's a great point, Sally, and I agree. That's the conclusion. I mean, I had someone on my team that, you know, honestly, we were about to pull the trigger, and we haven't. I'm holding off a little bit because it just doesn't feel like the right time, and trying to keep them, you know, as busy and as I possibly can. But I think another issue, which I don't know if it will become an ethical issue or what it becomes, but this whole thing of the shutdowns, right? Cities shutting down, regions, the country. We were spending time just yesterday talking about, okay, you know, in reality, we get it. You know, New York, you've got 40,000 cases or whatever, and you really have to be careful. But do we, you know, at the moment I mentioned we have all of our sales force working remote, our own headquarters office, we have people working remote. At what point do we start to let people go back to work? That's one of our toughest decisions. And you know, you can say it's very clear where there's shutdowns, although we are actually considered an essential business being a pharmaceutical, so that wouldn't necessarily restrict us. But like if you look, I don't even know if we have a rep in Wyoming, but if Wyoming has, you know, no cases or some areas of the country aren't really impacted compared to others, do you start to manage your own business in a different perspective? And we had an example, like if there was a hurricane somewhere, you know, or earthquake, something that really devastated a particular region, sure, you would be treating that different. You wouldn't shut down all of your offices or everybody. So we're really monitoring that, and we haven't figured it out, but it is a tough one that we're starting to think is you know, if this is going to go on for many months, at what point do you start to maybe do things differently for some than for others? And I don't have the answers.
That's a great point, Terry. We don't have what we call an exit strategy here because we kind of all gone into crisis mode. But at what stage do you actually start to tell people to go back into the office and, you know, we go on with life as usual? So I absolutely agree. I don't know when that point's going to come, and I don't know what that tipping point is either, actually. But it is something that crosses our minds too. We've kind of said to, you know, we've kind of said to our teams that until further notice, you know, no one goes back into the office. So it's really hard to understand when that tipping point is going to come, for sure.
And a great question we've asked ourselves just yesterday too. Again, I mentioned we have most of our employees are reps, and they're traveling. Most of the reps travel by car, but they're regional managers. There's about 12 or 13 of them actually have to fly a lot to go, you know, spend time with their different reps. And if we start putting people back in the field, the question we asked ourselves is, you know, at what point are you or I, you know, when are we going to feel comfortable getting on a plane again? And so is it right to ask our reps or our managers to get on planes and start flying if we ourselves might not be comfortable doing that? And so that's another part of the dilemma as well.
The biggest ethical question we're facing at Cayman Cargo right now is the decision, do we cut salaries of the salaried personnel, let's say by 25% in order to buy time, or do we call some of the low performers and around the fringes? And I'm pushing very hard that I really think that we should not necessarily take advantage of the situation, but these are things that we probably should have been doing anyway to reduce low performers. And I'd rather do that first to protect everyone else. Again, but it's a really tough call, as Terry and Sally were articulating.
Well, there are also just some feedback I've heard across the small and mid-sized business community. There's a good number of thriving businesses.
Can you hear me now? Okay, I'm sorry. So I was on a I was on a webinar, and well, no, it's okay.
Sorry about that, Emily. Go ahead.
Okay, so shoot, I lost my train of thought. Shoot, what were you just saying, Sally? Or,
I lost your
no,
train
we were
of thought
talking
as
about
well.
how some people are excited about the, there's some good talent that inevitably is going to go into the market. And with unemployment previously being so low, those who are in growth mode, depending on their industry right now, are really have an opportunity to snag up great talent. And what are you doing not only to, you know, continue to invest in your employees and your team and your morale, so that when this is all over and you make it through, you know, they admire the leadership team for how they led through it and remain loyal to you, as we may see some shifts in workforce availability, job availability, new talent out there seeking new opportunities. So it could, you know, through every crisis, I truly believe that there's great opportunities and potential miracles. So, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty right now, but I'm also in the same balance of being worried about a lot of things that are to come. I'm also, you know, on the positive side, excited to see what might flourish as a result as well. Are there any comments on the chat that anybody would like to address before we talk to Ben about managing remote employees, or any last comments from the panelists? Thank you guys so much.
Just in closing, I would say the biggest thing is that one of the biggest compliments I can give to my team is how little change there really is in how we're managing cash and forecasting cash and micromanaging it now compared to how we were doing it before. And so we already had really good processes in place and procedures, and involving the whole team, the AP and AR leads in the cash flow forecasting in our 13-week forecast. And so just really good job on that. And then I know the team has done a good job of then pushing that corporate process out into Europe. Andy Van Dam, I mentioned, is on the call, our VP of Finance for Europe, and his team does a nice job now of forecasting that. David Garibaldi's doing it for the Latin American businesses. And one of the other challenges, just to mention in brief, is the U.S. labor laws are very different than what we're experiencing in Latin America and in Europe as far as what we can do and how quickly we can move. And so that's been a big challenge. And again, having Andy and David already on board and very familiar with those laws and rules has really helped us go quicker and enabled us to be nimble in making personnel decisions. But, that's all I have to say.
Emily, maybe just to say, in a time of crisis like this, you know, as CFOs, our leadership is so critical. And I would just say we've got to remember to take people on the journey with us now. It's time, you know, we are in a critical position to step up as leaders and to guide the business through these times. So, you know, we will also be judged by our reaction through this crisis. So just remember, take people on the journey with you, and keep those motivation levels up, and keep that human contact.
Yeah, and just to add to Charlie and Sally, I think the one thing I would say, and we actually talked about this on our pre-call the other day, you know, I think we, you know, we've talked a lot today about our internal teams, but I think relying on each other, this leadership council, talking to other CFOs, talking to other people, and Jennifer, I'm putting a plug in, but it's actually true. A lot of the time when I'm just calling some of the bankers or other people, I want to listen and learn. And you know, we really shouldn't assume that we know the answers. And I think understanding what other companies are doing, what other CFOs are doing, how they're handling it is just really insightful. I was on one call, I listened in on a webinar from our IR agency this week, and it gave me an idea on something I hadn't considered. So use the external resources you have, including the CFO Leadership Council, but just reaching out to each other. And I think that'll help all of the business and the market come back as well.
Just a quick comment. I literally cited Terry and Sally and I's conversation to my CEO when we were talking about the decision on the 401k. I was talking about what you guys said. So, yeah.
Again, credibility. Terry and Sally think it's a good idea too. But I think it was at the beginning slide. If you don't know how to get onto that CFO Connects exchange, we can get, maybe send those links out again. I'm new to the CFO Leadership Council and not technically a member, just a sponsor. So I don't know how to direct you there, but I'm sure Jennifer can. I'd love to have this group be able to continue to support each other rather than just one webinar. So there's if you need CPE, please email Jennifer at CFO Leadership Council, CFOLC.com. All right, if there's no other questions from the group, Jennifer, I'll turn it back to you.
Sure, thank you guys so much. That was such an engaging, interesting conversation, and I'm sure Tommy wants to say a few words as well.
Thank you for everybody attending. Thank you for Emily for moderating, and Terry and Charlie and Sally for being the panelists with your great insights and help for everybody. And I hope this has helped.
Absolutely. So Ben is going to take it over, and he has an interesting update for us in a positive perspective. So Ben, I'm going to turn off our videos, and thank you again, panel. And please stay on if you'd like to hear from Ben.
Awesome. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Emily and Sally, Terry, Charlie. That was great. A lot of great points and things to think about. And I think you guys are right. By having this community and platform, it allows people to have some of that, stilling with pride of ideas and thoughts. So that's what I love about CFO Leadership Council. I learn so much every time I attend an event. As I mentioned before, Baco is a talent solutions firm. We focus in finance and accounting, project solutions, technology, and staffing operations. And a big portion of my job is keeping a strong pulse on the market. So for the past 2 weeks, I've been nonstop research mode, been on multiple calls per day with Vaco Nation and the leadership at our other 40 offices across the country. And I think that gives me a unique perspective because I get to see what's going on in other markets as well. And listen, at the end of the day, what makes this a difficult time is just the level of uncertainty. I think one thing I have noticed in doing a lot of my research is that while the numbers continue to climb in some of the hot zone areas like New York and Washington and Louisiana, the numbers in North Carolina, seem to be growing at a much slower rate, right? So what does that mean? I think there's two impacts from a talent perspective that you're going to see, kind of alternative to layoffs and hiring freezes is one, knock on wood, if these numbers do subside and this COVID mess is behind us in the next 4 to 8 weeks, something that is scary is that all of these companies are going to hit the market at once. So for salaried professional employees, the market will be just as tight, if not tighter than pre-COVID, right? Because if everybody is hunkering down and trying to avoid layoffs, throughout this mess, if it does subside pretty quickly, we're going to see people scrambling, right? So the second theory is, some really smart companies that are in a healthy cash position, and not every company is affected the same, right? That's something that I think we have to be mindful of. They'll get projects completed and make critical hires that would have normally been challenging or too costly pre-COVID due to the extreme competition for talent. So we're still getting calls from clients that are still making hires. Certainly, jobs that are new addition or due to volume or growth, those are slowing or being put on pause. But some positions that were really hard to fill prior to, they're being filled now, right? So, I think the positive thing is a countless number of companies are stepping up to support their employees and donate resources to help with the relief. And I'm going to send some I'm going to put some links in the PowerPoint that Jennifer sends out after the webinar today. That'll lead you to these, but a few examples. Microsoft is continuing to pay their hourly workers that can't be on their campus. Delta Airlines, their CEO, is foregoing his salary for a year to try to diminish layoffs. VF Corporation, right here in our backyard, is closing stores through mid-April, and all their employees continue to get paid. I think I saw a sports equipment manufacturer. They're making medical shields for our hospitals. SpaceX and breweries, even here in Charlotte, are making hand sanitizer to donate to hospitals and other businesses. So I've never seen a country kind of all step up at once like this. So during uncertain and sometimes scary times, I think we do need to look at the positive. There's, regarding technology utilization, I think a lot of people on this call said that they're already have deployed, technology, and they're getting used to it and they're finding the new norm. I think Terry mentioned that. I think anybody that's on this call that's still in research mode and finding out what they want to use, Microsoft Teams has, offered a free trial for their premium plan for the next 6 months. LogMeIn, Cisco, Zoom, Jam, all those companies are offering 3 to 6 months of the free premium service. So I'll put some links in there, but I think they're stepping up in a big way. And something that I found really interesting doing a lot of this research, there's a professor at Wharton, Sigal Barsade. She did a presentation on emotional contagion. And that's the phenomenon of having one person's emotions and related behaviors directly trigger similar emotions and behaviors in other people. So, this happens as early as someone, being an infant and kind of follows you throughout your life, but you're the people that you surround yourself with is kind of an impact on your emotion. And now with social media and news and all these different outlets, it can become a lot, right? So as you're sitting in your house and you're working from home, you're probably checking more media than you ever have, right? So I think you have to be aware that emotional contagion exists, and understand what you can do to impact that. So I think one is limit the noise. Reduce the information in. It can be easy to look at Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook and all the different news outlets and start forming your own opinions that might affect some of your business decisions, right? So limit the information in from non-experts, but don't ignore it, right? Be judicious about information you're taking in. Use multiple resources. Go to the CDC. Go to another organization of medical experts, right? And don't allow opinions to form your opinion, and which again might affect business decisions. So I think something right now is like, I loved all the things that were talked about during the webinar about protecting customers, being great to employees, really all trying to kind of rally around each other. But I think, again, look for some of the positive things, share those with people, know that emotional contagion exists, and, do the things now during this time that's going to set you up for major success on the other end of this, right? And I think that's what I wanted to share with you guys today. And again, I'll put some links in the PowerPoint so you guys can go to some of the resources and things that I've researched. But I appreciate everybody joining us today, and appreciate CFO Leadership Council and the panel.
Thanks, Ben. That was a great update. I really appreciate it. And we'll send out those links, as you mentioned, to everybody that registered and attended today. I guess that's a wrap. So look forward to seeing you guys next time. We'll have upcoming another program like this We're also starting members only water cooler conversations for our CFO members. And we're going to do some more of these updates such as this one from our sponsors. They have a wealth of information and we're wanting to get that out to you directly. So look out for some emails from me and my team on these upcoming events, and please register. And hopefully we'll see you live soon, but if not, Zoom works pretty well. So thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.